Hi, McCord.
Hello.
I'm excited to chat with you today. We got to briefly
Likewise.
catch up, and it appears we removed alcohol from our lives in the same year. We are both runners. We are both within hospitality. So it kind of sounds to me that by the end of this episode, we may emerge friends from this. So
I hope
thanks
so.
for spending your time and for sharing your story with me.
Of course.
So tell me about your way into hospitality. How did you come to find it?
So hospitality was my first profession. I was a host when I was 15 at a higher end restaurant in Charlotte that we frequented as a family. And then from there, I just always gravitated towards it naturally. After that, I was a line cook at a fast quick service restaurant. I've done every position all through college, bar back, bartender, food runner. I had one shift where I would just come in and roll silverware for 4 hours, which was great. I never really looked at hospitality as a career until I actually got sober for the first time. But I had just always kind of gravitated towards it. I liked being on my feet. I liked being with people. I was good at it too. I always gravitated to serving, right? Most people are either like a bartender or a server. I loved bartending. It was fun, but I liked being on the floor. I liked having my own section, and I really liked kind of curating a dining experience for each guest. I was pretty good at memorization, so could remember the orders in my head. And I always, even after college, I worked as a bartender for weddings, and on weekends I would pick up shifts randomly just to make extra cash. And then alcohol really started as a problem in my life, which was, do you want me to go ahead and launch into
Yeah,
the
we can
alcohol
talk about that.
discussion?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So let's see, all through college, I worked as a bartender and a server and a silverware roller. And then after college, I graduated. Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life. I had majored in business administration, minored in film studies. So my dream job was working in casting as a casting director. I had had a couple interviews. I moved from Charleston, South Carolina. That's where I went to college and worked a lot of hospitality jobs throughout that entire stint. And after I graduated, I moved back home to Charlotte, worked at a restaurant, was trying to figure out my next steps. And then I met a guy and moved back to Charleston for him and ended up as a inside sales analyst at a shipping company, which was as boring as that sounds. Worked a couple jobs too in the hospitality industry through there, but while in that relationship, that's where I really developed my addiction fully manifested. I had always been, a fun social drinker, never crazy. I definitely like to have a good time, but I got good grades in school. I was senior class president of my class at College of Charleston, and alcohol was never an issue. And then I moved back to Charleston, found myself in a job that I was miserable at and in a relationship that centered around alcohol. And it really just developed. I think it was a combination of several different things, but mostly, it was me at the end of the day making those decisions and going back to the bottle. And it's funny when you're in those situations with alcohol, I often get the question, when did it cross the line, right? When was the moment that you went from being a social drinker to a addict? And there's never a specific moment. It wasn't like, oh, this moment was the time that it happened. It just slowly, gradually manifested itself. And one day you're drinking socially with friends, totally normal. And then the next day you're sneaking shots of vodka at your car at 10 a.m. and excusing that behavior. I knew something had to change. I thought a change of scenery would help. So I decided to move to Los Angeles and finally pursue my dream of working in casting. So I moved to LA, broke up with the boyfriend, got to LA. And if you have a slight addiction in Charleston, South Carolina, it does not get better when you move to Los Angeles to become a bartender. So I was bartending and working actually at a casting firm in LA, and my addiction fully manifested. It went from a definite problem in Charleston. I had friends started getting concerned, people kind of pulling me to the side saying, hey, I think you're might be drinking too much. And that's where I kind of started hiding my alcohol consumption. I would start drinking a little bit before I went out and then drinking afterwards. Was really good at the Irish exit. But in LA, I had no accountability. I had cashed out my 401k, so I had about $15,000 in savings that I just blew through in 9 months, mainly on booze. I'd done other drugs as well, but booze was really just my kryptonite. In LA, I had a visit from my brother and his girlfriend at the time, and that was kind of where my family really got concerned. I had alcohol withdrawals where they were here. I was falling asleep at the table at dinner. Was not great. Fast forward 3 months, and I went to my cousin's wedding in Atlanta, Georgia. And day one of the trip, I suffered from alcohol withdrawal. So I got really sick, right? So I took NyQuil to get better because I kind of helped cover it. And by day two, I was drinking again, got through the wedding. But by the end of the wedding, there was no doubt with my family that I had a major issue with alcohol. I also woke up the morning after the wedding and walked to a liquor store and bought a bunch of mini bottles and just started drinking them. And one of my best friends, Elizabeth, actually was my date to the wedding. And that's where she contacted my family, who was also there, and just said, hey, this is what's happening. She had already seen multiple issues when I had lived in Charleston as well. So obviously was not getting better. I remember not much from that trip, but I remember coming back down from my hotel room and everyone just being in the lobby. And they said, hey, we're going to go have a chat. And I just knew in that moment we're talking about my addiction, and went to one of my siblings' hotel's room and had my first and only intervention. So sat there and just kind of resigned. I had no money at this point. I had gone through all my savings, really didn't have any options. Was my internship at the casting firm that I worked at had just renewed. So I had another assignment that was starting. So that was kind of like my only reason for going back, but I was about to get fired from my hospitality job. Gosh, man, I remember when people would order a cup of coffee or a martini, my anxiety would just go through the roof because I would immediately start stressing out because I could not, and I knew I could not deliver it to this table because my hands would be shaking so bad. So intervention happens and I did not go back to LA. I never returned. I ended up going with my mom and her husband at the time, who incidentally was sober, and went to Florida for a couple of days to detox. And then I ended up going to a rehab facility in Maryland called Mountain Manor, which was an experience. I was there for 28 days. I had no health insurance, so it was the only place that my family could afford. I think it was like $7,000 for the entire month, and it was rough. Institution was, if you had good behavior in prison, you went to this location to finish your sentence. So it was me with a bunch of people that had been in prison, and I just went like straight back in the closet, and it was just a very eye-opening experience that, looking back, I'm really grateful for. Like, I kind of learned the foundations of AA at the time, learned what addiction meant, and just reality really sunk in. From there, I went to a sober living house. My family wanted to continue supporting me and helping me get better, and I had no money at this point, so I resigned to that. So I went to a sober living house in Dallas, Texas, and was there for 9 months. While I was at the sober living house, that's where I looked at hospitality as a career for the first time. I had always, like I said, gravitated towards it, always looked at it. And I just remember I was working as a server at this restaurant called Eureka, which is a West Coast restaurant group, burgers, brown bar. And I was taking orders from this woman that was like 21. I was 24 at the time. 21, never had a restaurant job, and just did not know what she was doing. So I thought, I should do this. I should become a manager. Went up to the regional that was sitting there at the time, and he absolutely agreed. So I was living at the sober house, had this job opportunity. The sober living house that I was at was an experience, which I feel like we might need a separate podcast for. It was a very religious based. My family's very religious. I'm from the South, and I'm a very spiritual person, but have different views on organized religion. So this was a very Christian institution, and the focus, I was very vocal. I'm gay, so I was very vocal about, who I am as a person and how I've been to Christian institutions before and kind of grew up in the church. So I knew that oftentimes that was an issue. So I just wanted to make sure it wasn't an issue going in. And they said, absolutely not, wasn't an issue. Went to the sober living house, and within about 6 weeks, it became apparent that it actually was an issue. So the focus started with my addiction. That was what I was there for. And then over the next 9 months, the focus shifted to my sexuality. So all of the conversations stemmed around, homosexuality being a sin. So I constantly had to defend myself for multiple reasons. At this point in my life, I had a lot of shame around being gay still. And I also had obviously a lot of shame around the label of an addict. So the idea of having two labels that at that time I thought was a negative was just not an option for me. So I completely rebuffed the label of an addict. I refused to accept it. I was very stubborn and said, no, I wasn't an addict. I was depressed. I was depressed, and I found solace in a bottle. And you can be addicted, but you can be addicted to a substance, but not an addict, was my byline that I would tell anybody that listened. Meanwhile, I'm preaching that message and then also defending my sexuality. I remember I had to go up before I left. So after with hospitality, I got this job offer. So they decided to promote me to an assistant manager position, food and beverage manager, my first leadership role ever, actually. And they gave me the option of staying in Dallas or moving to Seattle, Washington. Moved to Seattle, obviously. I wanted to get out of Dallas. The community I was in was not letting me be myself. So I had to go up and present to these 12 men why I was ready to leave the house and become a productive member of society again. And during that hour and a half conversation, with all of them pelting me with questions, alcohol was not mentioned a single time. The entire conversation was my sexuality and me being essentially choosing to live in sin. So at the end of the day, I don't think that was the environment I was supposed to be in. But I'm also, looking back, I'm very grateful it all happened. It was an experience that made me very aware of who we can be as people and how, honestly, this place was very almost militaristic in terms of the way they would pit us against each other, right? So they would pit us against each other. Like when we had these like morning sessions and afternoon sessions and it was me and like 21 other young males, mostly in there for heroin. All of us would just tear each other apart. You're doing this wrong. You're doing this wrong. And it was just an interesting psyche, and it kind of broke me down also. So I just knew I had to get out. When they offered me Seattle, I said, absolutely. I got through it. I was the only gay person ever to graduate from that place. I will say I was proud of myself for not allowing, a lot of times in my past, I've kind of caved and told people what I think they wanted to hear. But in that situation, I did not. So I left. I went to Seattle and felt free for the first time. I was making money again. I could support myself. Thankful to my parents for getting me to that place, even though it was a rough journey through that entire process. But I'm back in Seattle for about a month and I started drinking again. I was working as a food and beverage manager at this restaurant in charge of the bar. I just wasn't ready to quit drinking, and I think at the end of the day, you have to make the decision for yourself, obviously, and I was not ready to do that. So I waited for an excuse to manifest itself. And I remember I was bartending about a month after I'd gotten there. And I couldn't remember, quote unquote, if I had put gin or vodka in this drink. So I was like, I'll just do a taste test. And that was it. So did a taste test and then I was off to the races. So for about a year after that happened, I would say I was a functioning alcoholic. Still did well at work, got promoted to assistant general manager, was on the fast track at this company. They loved me. Had a really great boss who I still keep in touch with to this day, who really guided me. And I was honest with her about my old struggles, but I had accountability. Right. So things started happening. I moved with the company and did a task force assignment for 3 months at a restaurant location in Cupertino. And that is kind of where my functioning alcoholism turned into just full-fledged alcoholism. I started drinking a little bit before work again, not going well. The manager that was in charge of that restaurant saw a lot of, holes and gaps in my ability to perform, which she was shocked at because I had come so highly recommended based on my previous experience. That addiction had fully manifested itself again. And when I returned to Seattle, it did not stop. I got a DUI for driving too slow, actually. I'm a very cautious person. And multiple other things happened, but I still was on decent terms at work, and they decided to give me a job transfer to Santa Barbara. That is where it went really, really downhill again for the second time. So I hit rock bottom really twice in my life. The first time was in Los Angeles, and the second time was in Santa Barbara. Got there. I had a little bit of accountability in Seattle. I had some friends, roommate, my old boss that I mentioned, and in Santa Barbara, I had none. And I just was drunk constantly for 3 months. Got the shakes. I also lived with another addict who was addicted to whippets. So by comparison, I looked fine because my other roommates were so focused on because his was so much more unable to be hidden. He was literally just in the living room cranking out whippets. So definitely not a good environment. And it got really, really bad. I started showing up to work drunk. I fell asleep at the office. Then it's funny. All of this is happening. It's February. All this is happening about 9 years ago at this time. So around this time frame, it always starts to feel a little heavy. Woke up one morning, had gone into work, and I sat down with my GM of the restaurant, who was 17 years sober, the kindest man. His name's John. We still keep in touch. And he just knew what I was going through and put me on a performance improvement plan. I went out that night, got wasted, had the next day off, got wasted again. And then that was St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. And I was supposed to work the 18th and called in and quit. I said, John, I can't do this. And he, wanted to come over, wanted to come help me, but he also was restricted because of, HR business protocols. And I just said, I can't, I quit. And I was about to get fired, obviously, at that point. From there, I went on a bender. I don't remember much from the next 12 days at all. I was drunk constantly, waking up, having a bottle of wine just to settle my stomach so I could eat something. I would throw up half of it, and then that's how I got any sort of nourishment. But that was my life. I remember the liquor store was 2 blocks from my apartment, and that distance felt so long, like such a hurdle to go just to buy a couple bottles. But I did it every single day. But that was my personal marathon. We called my brother Thomas and just said, I can't do this anymore. I remember my hands shaking so bad I couldn't dial his number, and I was smoking a cigarette and pulled up, held his phone up to my ear and just was like, I can't do this anymore. And he said, go to the hospital. So I called an Uber and I walked in on April 3rd, 2007 to the ER in Santa Barbara, California, and just said, help me. I'm suffering from alcohol withdrawals. And I did not leave for 6 days later, and I've not touched it since.
Wow.
Sorry, that was a really long ramble, but I think I got most of.
No. Did you ever, through all of that, did you know that who you are now was possible?
No, I did not. I honestly didn't. I always knew. I knew I was a good person. And even when, sorry, that was a good question. Even when I was drunk, I was always kind. I think, at least, I'm sure there are exceptions, but I don't. I did not know that was possible, or who I am now and who I'm becoming is possible. I had a moment recently where I kind of looked back on who I was and who I am now and who I'm becoming, and just got very grateful for all of it. At the end of the day, I would not change any of it. Not the sober living house where I did fight my sexuality, not drinking with random strangers that were displaced at my apartment and I have no idea who they are now, not blacking out at the office, lying on the floor at the restaurant and having one of my servers come in and just ask me if I was okay. All of these horribly embarrassing moments. No, I did not know. I did not know.
How did the light start to shine through for you? Who did you start to see?
Oh, my grandmother has always been she passed away last March, actually, has always been just kind of a guiding presence in my life. Her name is Dr. Joan Henry. She was a doctor of special education, and just since I was a child, always just knew what to say. And we always had a very, I say we because I still think I see her, parts of her often. And so she always just knew what to say. And honestly, the idea of disappointing her and her husband and my mom's dad as well. Those are my dad's parents. My mom's dad as well. It just kind of was always in the back of my head. I didn't want to be this person, right? And the one thing, I'm proud of a lot of stuff that I've done, but the one thing I'm most proud of is that I was able to get better while they were still here. So they were able to see that side of me, and that's something I'm very proud of. And I struggled for a really long time with all of this. I was the fuck up and the mess up, but having them and the relationship that me and my grandmother had for the last, 9 years was just something that was so special. And that I'm probably proudest of anything that I've done, was being able to her to pass on and know that I was going to be okay. Yeah.
It's a good feeling.
It really is. Yeah. I'm very proud of that.
Did the two of you get to have any conversations where she got to express to you what she saw? I know that parents and grandparents, for better or for worse, can always see the best in us. Mm-hmm. And even when things are really difficult, what comes to mind is I remember being young with my grandmother, and I was playing, and I had a filthy shirt and I was super sweaty, and she was like, give me a hug. And I was like, no, I'm so gross. She's like, I don't care. And that is just the way that a lot of good grandparents are. So even as we're going through these kind of tarnishing moments, they care, but they don't care enough to push you away. Did you get to have moments with her in these 9 years where she got to say that she's proud of you or she loves you, or feeling those moments?
Yeah. I mean, I still have our text. I'm a writer in my free time, and I get that from her. And her mother as well. Her mother was a published poet, and she journaled through her whole life. And so we just had this large kinship through just writing letters, and I still have all of her letters, and the words that she has said to me that I still have ground me still to this day. When I got sober, she said that, When I got sober for real, she called me with just so much grace and kindness and said, in life, just as in music, the rest are equally as important as the notes. Play them. And it was exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. And I use it actually. I train in hospitality now because it's so important for us to just take a moment and take a pause, right? And when we allow for space to live between our high notes, just to have moments to ourselves, we create our harmonious balance and we get to live in peace, really. So it's become my mantra and something that I'm a very intense person. Reminding myself to take those moments and take those moments of rest is difficult. Sitting still is hard for me. My mind goes very, very quick. I'm sure you can probably relate to that as well. So it's actually my tattoo. It's a musical rest. And it's just
nice.
a constant reminder. It's a 16th note, but it's a 16th note just for me to husa, take a moment, take a rest. And she always tries to credit someone else with saying that, but I've looked it up and I can't find anybody else that's ever said anything similar. So I'm like, Mimi, that's you get credit for that one. Yeah, she told me multiple times and at every chance she could how proud she was of me. I'm just very, very grateful. And I did a really good job in the last several years of making an effort to go see her and spend as much time with her and hold her hand and just be with her. And yeah, that's one of the things I'm most proud of over the last couple of years. The fact that I was able to do that. Right.
It's so beautiful that you got that because, we have to do this for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be good so we can be good for them. But in the time that passes, you get to see that the ways that a good you benefits others. And that's just so great. You got to have that together.
I agree. And I have a quote page called ScriptedWit. I post a quote every single day online, and she is probably my most quoted person just because of her letters and just wisdom exuded from her. The fact that I was able to absorb that and record it and keep it, I'm grateful to look back on that, especially now that she's no longer with us.
What did you get to discover in yourself? It sounds like within work, you get to become an educator and sharing what you know and love of hospitality. You have writing in there. Were all these things that were like available at the surface that you couldn't tap into through drinking and then were able to be discoverable? More?
It was all a journey, right? So after I got sober for real, I walked out of the ER on April 9th. I had no money at this point again. And second time, rock bottom. And my brother, Thomas, who I mentioned earlier, that encouraged me to go into the ER, told me to come live with him. He was like, a hotel just opened. Come stay with me, live for free, get back on your feet. And I'll be forever indebted to him for that kind gesture. So I did just that. I moved across the country. My grandmother mentioned paid for my belongings to get shipped. And I started as a server in a luxury property called Pendry, Montage, in 2017, and just kind of took a step back. Not everyone, many people in my life encouraged me not to go back into hospitality, right? Booze readily available to you every chance you get. It's a addiction-based culture. So they felt like I was just walking right back to the scene of the crime and going to dive right back in. At this point, something had changed within me. I just knew I was done. I finally had accepted it for myself. I didn't know exactly what it looked like or what my future looked like, but I wasn't scared about drinking again. It wasn't a concern of mine. Obviously, it's always kind of in the back of my head, something to monitor and be aware of. But the idea of picking up alcohol and drinking it just did not compute in my head. It was like 1 + 1 = 3 or something. I remember also having a conversation. My uncle is, I was about to say 17 years, but he's now over 25 years. My uncle David, my dad's cousin, we called him Uncle David. I had gone up to see him about 3 weeks after I had moved to Baltimore, and we had a conversation about his journey, and he told me and shared his story, which I don't think he would mind me sharing. His addiction looked much different than mine. It wasn't a constant every single day thing, but it was after work, 5 to drunk, right? And then weekends were constant. He told me a story about his wife, how she came into the garage at 9 a.m. on a Saturday and he was chugging a beer. And the look of disgust that she had given him, he just felt it in his gut that he was done. He threw the beer in the garbage, half empty, and said, "That's the last drink you'll ever see me take." And that was it. That was the last one. He told me that becomes a moment where you just know. And for me, my moment was that conversation. In that moment, I felt like I got hit in the stomach. I saw every future moment that I had held on to as a reason not to give up alcohol flash before my eyes. Like almost like my life flashing before my eyes, but in reverse in the future. I saw future weddings with champagne toast. I saw future steaks with a Cabernet that I'd always put together. I saw future shots of Jameson. I saw myself going to Ireland and drinking whiskey like I had always envisioned, or going to Italy and having the Italian wine that I always wanted. I've now gone to Italy and not had wine, and it's actually possible. And I just felt it in that moment. It was like I got punched and I felt lighter. And so when people told me not to go back into hospitality, like I said already, I'm a little stubborn. I'm glad I ignored them because I gravitated back to it. I crushed my job as a server. I loved serving tables. And over the next year, I feel like my first year of sobriety, I like to call it my year of, it was gray, right? I was relearning how to do everything. I was relearning how to walk, how to be friends with people without alcohol, how to make connections, how to rebuild trust that I had lost. And I was very, very sluggish, and people told me, oh, look at real estate. I took courses, couldn't do it. Looked at all these other things, different venues, and just kept returning to hospitality. And I remember after about a year of this kind of sluggish behavior, I was chain smoking cigarettes. I got my drive back and it came back in full force. I went from kind of a 0 to a 180. Everything was intense. Everything was intense. Everything was important. And I couldn't really separate the two. So I became manic and very intense, and I threw myself into work. Work became my next addiction. So I focused on work, showed up every single day, did a really great job in the hospitality industry and got promoted quickly, but there was something else that was missing, and that was like mental health and mental awareness. So
Rest.
I actually had a friend, rest. I had actually hadn't had the tattoo at that time. I got it about 2 years later when I had actually discovered mental health. I wish I had the book with me, but one of my best friends, Caroline, sent me a book called Heart Talk by Cleo Wade. She sent it to me because our friendship was on the line, right? I was calling her every single day, shit dumping my life. Everything was a problem. Everything was shit. And it was never my fault, obviously. And she couldn't handle it anymore. So she sent me this book, not aggressively, passive, graciously, and just said it might help. And I read an excerpt every day for about 3 months, and I credit it with completely changing my life. I went from, it's still, obviously mental health is a journey that we're still learning every single day, but it was the first time that I was able to reflect and pause and listen to my grandmother's words and take them in and realize that work is not everything, right? Hospitality is important, and I'm grateful that I get to do this every day, but that does not define who I am. So that is a balance that I definitely had to learn over the next couple of years still, as I, worked really hard in hospitality, got promoted. I was in food and beverage. I went back, obviously, and I'm grateful for that entire journey. I was in food and beverage and operations for 4 years in Baltimore, worked my ass off. That's where I got into quotes. That's where ScriptedWit was born, in the back of a house at the Rec Pier Chop House on the communication board. I would write a quote of the day for my team every single day. And then one day I just started posting it online and worked operations for 7 years for Pendry, grew with the brand, and then I switched to learning and development.
Oh, yeah. What does learning and development mean for you?
So learning and development, that's a good question. With learning and development, I have the privilege of translating my passion for hospitality to others, right? I'm so grateful I did not listen to anybody telling me not to go back into hospitality after I got sober, because I truly love this industry. Acts of service is my love language, right? I love giving, cooking dinners for people, being thoughtful, finding different ways to be thoughtful. So I gravitated towards training. When I was with Pendry, I would do task force and go open new properties. And so with that, I would kind of conduct little mini training sessions with the food and beverage team to show them, okay, it's not just about getting to the table within 1 minute. It's also how you get to the table, and your presence is the key factor for making sure that you're just not taking orders, but creating an experience. So that's where I kind of got the bug for training. And then I worked for Forbes Travel Guide for a year. That was a dream gig. I had served the Forbes travel trainer when I was a server in Baltimore, my two months into that stint. And I just remember thinking, this guy has the gig. He goes around to the best hotels in the country. He is a PX at every hotel, or a VIP at every hotel, or we call them FOP at proper, and gets to share his passion. So I applied for the position and got the role. And that was my first official stint from operations, where learning and developing people, colleagues, managers was kind of a side task to my full career. Now, I loved Forbes, but the thing I kind of felt was missing with Forbes was the community aspect. One of my favorite jobs and to go back to your question on what learning and development is, the development aspect. One of my favorite jobs of being a director of food and beverage outlets at Pendry was the fact that I had a team that I could build, and I could see their growth and see where they started and where they are. And I also had managers that reported to me that I was able to guide and mold and teach them lessons that I had learned, but learned the hard way. With Forbes, I missed that. I was a little bit of a chameleon. I would come in for 2 days as a consultant and not see any sort of continuity or growth. Now, it was a great institution. I'm so grateful for my time with that brand, and it opened up the door to proper hospitality where I am now. But I missed the development side, right? I would come in, I would be a celebrity guest star, I would talk about service, get everyone excited about it, and then I would leave and not see any of the results. And it felt like I was an actor performing a show. I got really habitual, and an opportunity with Proper came along where I got to do that, but on a more consistent basis, on a daily basis with a team that I got to build relationships with. And I was really missing that aspect. So now I get to develop teams, get to go in, get to train on service, what we do, and not only teach them, the steps of service and how important it is to have a 5-minute check-in at the host stand, but also the genuine interest part, the warmth, how you connect with the person, and how it not only makes the guest experience better, but it also puts value and honor into the work that we're doing every single day.
How has sobriety and those teachings that you've found within work manifested into your life outside of work?
It all goes hand in hand. It's hard to kind of figure out which one came first, right? Did me getting exposed to mental health create a better trainer? Was it me developing training that realized was missing the aspect of training, I guess. For me, it's not just one or the other. It just blends really well together. So I have to say, with sobriety, one of the benefits of me being sober is that I can consistently rely on myself every single day. So when I say something, I'm going to do it, which is something that I was never able to do for 12 years. So when it comes to work, I'm a good colleague. I'm a good employee. I show up, I do the job, I have deadlines, I make them. And then outside of life, the same is true, right? If I have I consistently set goals for myself, whether it's in work or in life, and I'm able to achieve them. Cleo Wade, Heart Talk, said, "Create your own finish lines. May there be as many as you want, and let there be many." And so that's an aspect that I've completely taken ownership in whether it's in my life or at work. And for me, they kind of blend together. I do have a good separation and a really good work-life balance now, but I definitely allow them to trickle over into each other, right? If I have a passage that I read from Heart Talk at every single training session, because I think it's important that we're not just talking about the guest and what we can do at work, but it's important you think about how you're showing up every single day, right? The previous learning and development manager, vice president at Montage, learned a lot from her and just watching her teach lessons. And she always said, you have a message out there. What is your message going to be?
What you said about creating moments and not just taking orders. And that kind of struck me as the ways of slowing down within life. It brought me back to what you were talking about with rest. And I feel like I'm at a point within my sobriety where the things that I have taught myself within sobriety are now kind of leaking into the rest of my life. And I'm able to sort of pick up some of these moments or these thought starters that I thought only resided in sobriety. And then I'm realizing, this is a teachable life moment. This is something that can be compared to the outside world. And it's just made, my life through therapy that much easier because I'm able to apply some of these tools. So I was just interested in, you are training these things to folks. You've also taught yourself some things within sobriety. And we've heard a little bit about how it's found its way into work, but, how have those teachings found their way into your out of work life?
I think for me, the biggest lesson that I try and instill, not only my colleagues that I'm training but also the leaders as well, is just the value of being present, right? It was a lesson that I learned from The Power of Now and also the Heart Talk book, Cleo Wade, where, you can only find the gifts that lie in the present if you're there to receive them. So when we constantly focus on what we have to do before we're actually doing it, we're missing out on those moments of joy, those moments where if we're paying attention, we can really enhance the guest experience. And the exact same is true for our life as well. If we're always constantly focusing on the next step of service or what we have to do tomorrow, or the fact that, this guy hasn't texted me back, you're missing the person that's in front of you or the sunset that is setting right then because you're not paying attention. So for me, that is something that I actually have a slide in my presentations that just says, how are we genuine? How are we genuine? Which seems silly that we have to spell it out for people. But at this point in our day and age, I think it's we have to, right? We live in a very noisy world. More is good, more is sexy, more is loud, that we forget that just by being present, we can actually focus on the small moments, right? My favorite thing is just about being present and finding those moments where we can spark joy and turn the guest around. And the same is true for our lives as well. I always talk about too, finding your why, right? Why you're here. And if this is just a job, great, it's just a job. But also, why is this a job for you? At the end of the day, you're here. So what kind of message you want to send? I always share my why, and I talk about being sober in that moment, right? It was, I had gotten back to Baltimore. It was 9.5 years ago. I'm sitting there wondering what to do next, wondering if I should look at real estate or, a different career path. And I was sitting at a restaurant that was like a walk-up fast casual knockdown version of Qdoba. Had ordered food, the tacos come out, and I'm eating there. And I watched this family of 4 come in, and they were bickering, they were arguing, and then their food came, and their entire demeanor changed. They went from fighting to sharing and laughing. And that is my why that I always go back to. And I tell my colleagues and whoever I'm training that is about how important it is just to find your purpose. Because for me in hospitality, we get to curate those moments. We get to turn guests that are not having a great day around and create a mundane, meaningless meal into something so much more than that if we do it correctly and if we're paying attention.
Yeah.
It's a pretty powerful moment in the training session when I talk about it because it's authentic to me and it's genuine. And I truly believe that in hospitality, we are there to serve others and we can actually make those moments memories. And in doing that, we actually just increase those person's lives and our lives as well. So it's just a give and a take, and it's very reciprocal.
Do you think that makes sobriety within hospitality difficult in that hearing it from you, and I've heard it from quite a few others on the show, myself included, of our love language being acts of service, where it's always you first, always me last, always. And sobriety requires a flipped script where it's you first, always, and then everyone else next. Did you find any difficulty with that, or were you able to just kind of like pick up the call of your sobriety and focus on yourself pretty quickly?
I've always been good about establishing boundaries, even since I was a kid. I needed my me time. My family jokes about McCord, they call me Cordy. They joke about Uncle Cordy's me time, but it's something that I've needed since I was a child. So gravitating back to that, even when I got sober, was not hard and more necessary than ever, right? I think we obviously need to serve others, but in order to do that, you need to serve yourself first, right? You have to be a little selfish. Selfish doesn't have to be a negative connotation. It can be something that's positive if you're actually taking the time to play the rest and take that time to recharge. So being able to reestablish those boundaries, it took time at the beginning, especially considering because I had lost so much trust. But for me, it's not been difficult. And in fact, my brother actually recently commented on it, the way I've been able to establish and be very vocal about what I need in order to succeed. Like whenever I go visit my family or friends, or if anybody comes and stays with me, I always ensure that there is a day before I return to work or a day before I return to the life that I need to be 100% on for, that is my own. So I'll come back a day early from vacations, or if friends are in town visiting me, I will take off an extra day after they've left. To others, that can seem selfish or rude almost, but to me, it's what I need in order to be the person that I'm becoming and the person that I want to be. So it wasn't hard. I think the hardest part was maybe allowing other people to see the benefits of it, which took a long time for them to kind of show that it wasn't just Cordy's a drunk and being, because honestly, with that whole selfish mentality or me time mentality, that is one of my dark parts of being an addict, right? When I was an addict, I wasn't cruel. I wasn't mean to others, but my cruelty stemmed from my absence. I hid. I was not present. I was focused completely on myself. So when I first became sober and reiterated that I still needed that, I think it took a lot of people time to realize that I was actually still a giving person, but you're able to do both. In my addiction, it just manifested as McCord was just only focused on himself, which was 100% accurate.
Who do you get to be as a runner?
So I broke my leg when I first moved to California back in November of 2024. So I did not have running for 10 months. And let me tell you, that was dark. Running for me is one of my me times. It's where I process everything. I do my best thinking on my runs. ScriptedWit, my passion script quote page project was born on a run. The idea of the name popped into my head and I was genius. I'll journal and write in my head on my runs and I'll put it on paper. Oftentimes people will ask me to run with me and I can't do it. I mean, I can do it occasionally, right? But for me, running is when I do my best processing, my best thinking. I'll cry on my runs often. So if you see me and I'm
Same.
crying on a run, just either, ignore me or join me. Yeah, honestly, not having it the most of last year was a challenge, and I had to find other ways to be centered. And it just honestly, nothing is the same for me. People are like, "Oh, swim or bike," and it's good. It's good to get the endorphins out, but for me, there's just something about putting your feet on the pavement and just going, right? And you get the runner's high. Yeah, running for me is
Everything else is
everything.
exercise. Running is something else.
Yeah, running is something. It's not even a task. It's an enjoyment. And I remember I used to run on the treadmill when I first got sober. I remember the first time I like ran outside and I was like, God, this is great.
I know one thing that I like really enjoyed about it is like when I removed alcohol, some of my first thoughts was like, what the hell do I do now? So
Yeah.
I had this like childlike moments where I was like, oh, well, do I go bowling? Like, what do I do with my time? And running like really arrived as something that like felt like play.
Yeah.
There's playful moments, there's like the dark moments of like the resurgence of the past self finds itself there. And you have to, it's a place where you get to learn how to reckon with it and hold it and keep it tight until you're ready to let it go. But sometimes you're just running through a park and
Yeah.
I get reminded of like I still am a little boy sometimes who
We
needs
are.
this.
Back to my grandmother, before I ran my first marathon, I try not to get emotional again. She said, "Give thanks for the trees as you run." I have the letter still. "Give thanks for the trees as you run. Give thanks to the oxygen for the miracle of breathing new air." Right. So whenever I run, that message will kind of reiterate in my head. And it's just an opportunity for me to be present and show gratitude just for the fact that I'm able to even do that in the first
Yeah.
place. And it's a feeling that I just cannot describe to anybody, but obviously yourself, because you get it. When I hear people say that they don't enjoy running, I'm like, you got to be doing it wrong, right?
Yeah.
It's something for me that I'm so grateful to have again in my life. I'm actually going to go on a run after we conclude. I'm not as good of a person without it, for sure.
Mhm. I was delivered a similar mantra while running a marathon last year. There was this
Which
moment where
one?
like it was in the Columbus Marathon,
Okay.
Columbus, Ohio. And I was running with my brother and we were in one of the more like noisy stretches, cowbells and people yelling and just like cheering. And it's just so exciting. But this one voice stood out. It was like this older guy who had his walker and, with some walkers that you can spin around and sit in them, he was sitting in it. And I just heard his voice only for a moment. And he said, running 26 miles, how lucky are you? And that just
Mm,
like kept bouncing forever and ever. And now when I'm running and I have those moments of just like, oh, is this really what I want to be doing right now? Like that voice will reappear of how lucky
I
are
love that.
you? And it just kind of like spawned the mantra of like, I run for the body that can't and the mind that will want to.
Yeah. There's whenever I have done marathons in the past, I always try and partner with a nonprofit to raise awareness for the disease of addiction and monetary funds. This is actually the first marathon that I've not done that. And the reason I am not is because I'm not sure I was able to run at all because of my knee. So this is kind of my trial run getting back to doing it full time with the rest of the Abbotts. That's my goal. So there's a person that I knew from the sober living house that's no longer with us. He's an addict that died, and his father had reached out to me, and he's one of those people that is not able to run, right? And
Mhm.
so he's also in the back of my head as I run, like you said, there's people out there that can't do it, so we got to enjoy it. We got to take it for who it makes us and how important it is, and do what you can with it when you can. So I'm looking forward to partnering with different nonprofits. If you have any recommendations, let me know for when I sign up for my next Abbott major.
That's amazing. Cord, what do you love about yourself?
I love that I'm thoughtful. I love that I am an overthinker. I love that I am artistic, and I love the pain that I've gone through. Stephen King said there is great clarity inside the pain, and that is something that you have to learn the hard way. But I'm grateful for all of the pain that I went through because I feel like I'm able to see myself clearly. I know who I am. I know my faults. I'm working on them. And I also am not done growing. So when you said, did you ever think you would be the person that you are now at the beginning of this podcast? And it like made me choke up. The answer is definitely not. But I also have no idea the person I'm going to be in 5 years. And I'm excited to meet that person. And I'm sure the same is with you as well, right? We are continually growing. And I think it's just a constant effort and a constant task for us to just make sure that we're still refining and learning and being humble enough to know our mistakes, but work towards something better. That was a really
Absolutely.
long answer to your question, but
No, I
yeah,
thought it was great.
thank you.
What a beautiful journey to meeting you. Thanks for sharing, McCord.
Likewise. Thank you.